All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We spend so much time in the Web3 and tech spaces worrying about external hacks, faulty code, or, wild market volatility. But today, we're going to unpack a structural vulnerability that is far more insidious. It's one that actually uses the very nature of human language and legacy law totally against you.
Now, I want you to picture a genuinely chilling scenario for a second. What happens when a trusted insider, let's say a compromised co-founder, acting as a proxy for some unknown government actor, is the one deliberately sabotaging your project from within? We aren't talking about a grand, cinematic conspiracy theory here. No, we're talking about a very real, highly documented process of institutional capture.
Researchers actually have a name for this. They call it co-opted state reconfiguration. It's a mouthful, I know. But basically, this happens when seemingly legitimate, licit agents operate on the inside to subvert and manipulate an organization. It's not an external attack at all, it's internal shadow governance. The threat operates entirely in the gray area, exploiting the system's own rules to slowly reconfigure the network's purpose without anyone on the outside ever even realizing a takeover has occurred.
So to understand why they do this, we need to look at parapolitics. These shadow actors basically operate like a protection racket. They deliberately manufacture crises, stimulate bureaucratic gridlock, and just foster general ambiguity. And why? Well, to maintain the demand for their own services. By keeping a network trapped in constant, low-level legal and administrative chaos, the compromised insider ensures they remain absolutely indispensable to solving the very problems they quietly created in the first place.
Section 1. Wet code versus dry code. Let's look at the collision of these two worlds. On one side, we've got wet code. Think of this as traditional human law. It's squishy, highly relational, and inherently ambiguous. It's forgiving because, well, humans are forgiving, right? We bend rules when context demands it. But on the exact opposite side, we have dry code. This is the language of machines and deterministic smart contracts. It operates strictly on Boolean logic. It is binary, and it is completely cold. It literally does not care if you had a bad day or meant something else. If the exact mathematical condition isn't met, it simply doesn't execute.
Moving on to Section 2, the tar baby trap. This is where ambiguity gets weaponized.
The weapon of choice here is something called the tar baby. If you know your folklore, you know it's a dummy made of tar and turpentine used as a trap. And the whole point of it is that the more aggressively you punch, kick, and fight it, the more inextricably stuck you become. In organizational dynamics, this represents a sticky, ambiguous problem that's deliberately designed to completely paralyze you with friction the harder you try to resolve it.
Okay, so here is the exact playbook they use. Step 1. The compromised co-founder infiltrates the organization as a trusted, seemingly legitimate partner. Step 2. They intentionally bait the network into the endless friction of traditional law. They'll introduce vague contracts, demand super complex multi-entity structures, or just spark subjective compliance debates. Then, step 3, they literally just sit back and let the wet code bureaucracy do the work. The project becomes so bogged down in legal semantics and human interpretation that actual deterministic execution is totally paralyzed. You are officially stuck in the tar.
Section 3, the probabilistic miasma. Welcome to the fog of guesswork.
The probabilistic miasma is basically this dense, foggy, totally unreliable ecosystem of guesswork where the true source and intent of an action is deliberately obscured. Instead of relying on technical robustness, the compromised insider pushes for vibe coding. That's this probabilistic social logic that rewards conformity and ambiguity. They might use scandal politics to amplify distrust or establish crazy nested multi-entity shell structures, like creating a 501c3 that feeds into a 501c4 just to completely hide donor identities and true intent. And hey, if you think manipulating language like this is a new trick, it is absolutely not. Way back in 1916, Judge Learned Hand noted it takes the ingenuity of a saint and the patience of a yogi to decipher dense legal text. The deliberate deployment of fuzzy modifiers and ambiguous language is an ancient, highly effective stalling tactic. It's a feature of wet code, not a bug, and it's exactly what the parapolitical insiders uses to trap you.
Section 4, the record of sweat. This is where mathematical proof comes in.
So, how do we actually escape this? Well, you can't out-argue bad faith in a wet code system. The real solution? You have to bypass the subjective human element completely. We achieve this by crossing what's called the semiotic bridge. See, human thought is associative and fluid, but computer hardware is entirely rigid and blind to human semantics.
The semiotic bridge is the strict, explicit text translation layer that safely squeezes our boundless, messy imagination into a rigid, unhackable structural template. It's the only way to guarantee that what you intend is exactly what the machine executes, leaving zero room for a bad actor to manipulate the meaning.
The good news is we actually have the technical tools to build this bridge right now. Defeating the insider threat comes down to things like ERC 7827, which introduces value version control right into JSON smart contracts, maintaining a flawless mathematical record of every state transition. By pivoting to a LIFO, last in, first out, structure, you get a highly efficient, tamper-proof, single-entry bookkeeping. It tracks cryptographic signatures to create a permanent, verifiable history. The source materials brilliantly call this a record of sweat. This mathematical proof of human effort completely eliminates the probabilistic vibe coding that insiders rely on to cause all that chaos.
All of this leads us to a really foundational concept called protortion. It's not just about swapping lawyers for code. It's about aligning strict technical execution with the legal principle of promissory estoppel. Basically, it ensures that when a promise is made on a network, it is mathematically guaranteed to execute. It uses formalization and deterministic math to protect the reliance interests of the 99% against the discretionary whims and those tar baby traps of the 1%. It completely replaces legal grace with undeniable digital truth.
This setup creates the ultimate balance of power. The human pilot applies the intent, but the agentic cell executes the sweat. The machine is just a deterministic scripter doing the heavy lifting flawlessly, but you, the human, remain the sovereign pilot. By forcing all organizational rules into dry code, you just entirely strip the parapolitical actor of their ability to interpret, stall, or manipulate the project's intent.
In practical terms, this means moving away from the bloated, fragile illusions of graphical user interfaces and embracing the unmediated reality of a command line interface, or CLI. When you use unbreakable pseudo-terminal channels, you create a 100% exact, lossless text log. There's zero guessing, there's zero ambiguity. A strict text pipeline prevents any malicious insider from exploiting that gap between what is said and what is actually executed.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway for this explainer. If you leave your network's governance to the squishy, ambiguous realm of legacy wet code, you are leaving the front door wide open for shadow capture. You're basically inviting the tar baby trap. So I want to leave you with this provocative question to ponder. If your rules aren't written in deterministic dry code, who is truly piloting your future? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the architecture around you.